星のように朝に溶けて消えてゆく行き先をなくしたまま思いは溢れてくる
Hello, and welcome to our new spoiler talk for the Trail series. I've done it for Cold Steel, I've done it for Cold Steel 2, and I'm gonna do it for this one. It's gonna be a bit shorter because I don't have as much time to do these as I used to, and I'm working on some other stuff in the background and getting videos out for the series I am doing, but... Oh, and the fact that this is Trails in the Sky, and I don't feel as though there's as much to talk about. Especially since a lot of the reveals were stuff I already knew to some extent. So... Yay! Okay, so basically, I've got a list of a few things I want to discuss here. Things that I wouldn't be able to include in my review when I get around to that. Yes, it's been several months since I've posted a review, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure out a way to do it that actually works in my schedule and actually is a good review and whatnot. And really, that's what is the biggest holdup over anything. With that in mind, the first thing I just, in general, wanted to talk about, I suppose, would be the characters. Joshua seems like the most obvious one, doesn't he? See, I mentioned before that it seemed weird that he was as strong as the ending made him out to be, despite all that game. And I guess I still don't really buy it, because it's not like... I will use comparison to Cold Steel. Spoilers for Cold Steel, by the way. Spoilers for every single game I played, which is Cold Steel 2, and Sky. So, yeah. So Cold Steel had a sort of actually similar reveal in terms of Crow. And when you think about it, Crow's actually really good at what he does. He's not as strong as he should be when you do fight with him. There's a good reason behind it. He's using entirely different weapons. He has an entirely different setup for how he fights and stuff like that. And it's a really believable way to go about it. Now, if Joshua had changed his weapons sort of in the same way that they had Cassius do, where he went from swords to staff in his background, then yeah, that makes a ton more sense. Now, if Joshua shows up in Trails in the Sky 2nd chapter and he's using a completely different set of weapons, then okay, sure, I'll drop this entirely. And you don't need to tell me, I'll figure it out then. But until they do that, it's hard to believe that someone is progressing and learning more at a rate. Because he's leveling up, he's getting this stuff. It's like, oh, is he holding back? How would you not notice someone's holding back in their fighting when you live with them for years on Estelle's front? I guess that's part of it, basically. It bugs me a little bit. And it's just something I wanted to talk about. In general, I like Joshua. Joshua's quite a good character. I like his reveal. I like his relationship with Estelle, and obviously I discussed during the Let's Play how I like that so much better than how Cold Steel had a sort of similar thing with Rain and everything. See, that's a much more believable, that one. It's definitely interesting how some things are done better. There's definitely a lot of similarities to Cold Steel, and I think they are probably done on purpose in terms of just story beats and whatnot, that sort of thing. They're probably done on purpose in order to give a sort of familiarity to what the original story probably was. From my understanding, that was supposedly one of the bigger complaints about Cold Steel, which honestly, I don't even mind coming back to Sky. I don't even mind to see the similarities. It's just sort of very obvious. It doesn't really deter from me, the experience, but it's fine. Because the stuff like Reen and his sister and Estelle and Joshua, all that stuff, it's done differently enough that it's weird because some of them do it better, some of them do it worse. And it's interesting to see how each of them tries to execute it and how some of them fail at it and stuff like that. But in general, yeah, I like that relationship, and I like Joshua as a character. Now, one other thing that really, this character section is going to be a lot more about Joshua than anything else, because him and Estelle were much more fleshed out than all the other characters. His weird obliviousness, because I remember stuff at the beginning of the game where basically he's just he seems like he's into Estelle and he's all that sort of stuff, and he's sort of looking for Estelle, and Estelle's the oblivious one, and then as soon as Estelle becomes aware, he suddenly just becomes the oblivious one. It's weird. The only explanation I can think of is that he's acting, because there was the mention near the end with the it's been a while since I actually recorded the game, so I'm not remembering all the names, but Professor Alba, whatever his real name was, no, I don't want to say it. That was probably not his name. He said something about putting on a, like, facade of emotions. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember something along those lines, and it makes me feel as though I wonder how much, like, emotional, like, ability Joshua really has. Even if he's just been, like, brainwashed and trained to think he doesn't really have that in some way. He was talking about the cold-blooded aspects he didn't like at the beginning of the game. He had that sort of stuff, and especially at the end when he's, like, smiling and knocking out Estelle so he can leave, it's like, he's probably putting on an act. But that's the only explanation I can think of for his weird obliviousness too. And I wonder how much he really did that. And I wonder how much that is really a thing where he's trying to put on an act. Oh, I'm trying to act like a good brother, I'm trying to be this person, I'm trying to fit into the role. These aren't my real emotions, but I want to fit into this role and be happy and stuff like this. And some of my real emotions get out, that sort of thing. Or at the very least, maybe he's just thinking he's acting out the emotions because he doesn't know any better. Maybe that sort of thing. As for other characters, you know, I talk about Olivert, but I think tons have been said about Olivert. I mean, he's obviously there for, like, the wedding, or the wedding negotiation or whatever with, Chloe. That would be the weird... I want to see those two interact more. We didn't really see them interact much, did we? I wonder how well those two would actually get along. I'm not sure what would keep him in the country for the next one. I assume he's not there. I mean, maybe he's not even there on normal permission anyways. Maybe he went ahead on his own accord. Because, I mean, it's sort of obvious he's the one that they were inviting to all that, and obviously it never happened. So I wonder how that's going to play out. If I were to take a prediction, I'd say Olivert, probably the reason he stays in the barrel is out of his own pure interest. Oh, I like it here. I want to see how this all plays out because it's not done yet. Because it's obviously not done yet. That sort of thing. And he's gonna, and he'll probably end up being the sort of, like, maybe almost not really fourth wall breaking character who's like, yeah, because, like, he did that in the first game a little bit too. It's like, oh, I'm not the protagonist of this story. He'll keep making comments like that until inevitably the Chancellor's involvement, as they not so hinted at in the Cold Steel games, becomes relevant. Whatever that is. Because obviously Ouroboros is involved. I'm not sure if the Chancellor is just trying to go up against Ouroboros, or if there's something more to it, or I guess we'll see on that front. But it's an interesting dynamic looking at it from knowing some of the future events, especially the end of Cold Steel 2, and it makes me wonder really what the Chancellor's trying to achieve in his interaction with Ouroboros. As for the other characters, I don't know. I mean, I don't dislike any of them. I like Agate, I like Dita, I like good old Miss Silverstreak and stuff, but at the same time, I sort of prefer the class dynamic from Cold Steel. I guess this spoiler talk sort of becoming a comparison between Cold Steel and Sky to some extent. It's just what I have in my mind in terms of talking about it, I guess, because these spoiler videos are really just me listing out some subjects I want to talk about and rambling for a while, editing it down, and figuring it out from there. But yeah, I sort of prefer the class dynamic because all the characters felt like they were really actually part of my party, I suppose. The class was a great excuse, because in this, it was just like Estelle and Joshua. That's my party. Sherazard, Chloe, all the rest of them, they just tagged along every once in a while. Some of them, it's just like, you didn't need to be a party member. You could have been just in the exact same story role, and you would have been just as important to the story, like Tita. Why does Tita need to be a party member? I mean, I'm not complaining, I like her as a character, but it's like, why not one of the other random characters? Hell, her grandfather might have been a viable one to have as a character that could have been in the part. It just seems sort of random, and just like, there are people that are part of the story, more significant ones that might show up in multiple areas, that sort of thing, especially since all the areas were so cordoned off, that sort of thing. And you just get characters at a point, and they all happen to show up in the end when you can use them again, and they didn't feel like party members. So I prefer the class dynamic because it really did make everything feel a bit more cohesive in that sense. And don't give me just like, oh, like Agate's a bracer and stuff like that. You could have had like I know Agate was the bracer that was around working on stuff, and he was actually around for some of the time. For like Zin and stuff, you didn't need Zin to be a party member. It could have just as easily have been like one of the other 4 bracers that were around there at that time. And I wouldn't be surprised if those people become party members in the future. I would not be surprised in the slightest. They're in that part of the story. They're in more parts of the story simply because they wanted them to be a party member rather than what their actual role in the story was. I guess that's my feeling on it. Maybe I'll change my mind as the trilogy continues, or the duology of stories, because I assume the main story that they wrote at the beginning was is first and second chapter, and Sky the third is one that comes after. Maybe I'll change my mind after that as their further roles in the story become more evident. With that in mind, I do want to talk about the ending proper, and maybe tie it into some of my other thoughts from my previous spoiler videos, because one thing I'd like to address in these spoiler videos is my general pet theory that's going on for like the entirety of the series, because this is obviously one big story that's all connecting together in the end, that sort of thing. So the first thing that obviously comes to mind is Ouroboros and their role in all of it, and what they're trying to achieve. The thing about the ending is that it's obviously trying to introduce a lot more of this at this point in comparison to Cold Steel, which, while it introduced the stuff, and I mean, some people complained about how they introduced Ouroboros and that. I didn't really mind. I thought it was plenty fine. I didn't have any issues with it, especially at the time. But it also introduced more of the plan, that sort of thing. Now here we have Professor Alba, or whatever his name was, as almost definitely the equivalent, the one who's enacting the plan and whatnot, whatever it is in this one, the first stage, and then Cold Steel's like the second stage and that sort of thing. Cold Steel and Crossbell being the second stage, like in parallel. As for what they're trying to do, the one thing that I have not seen in the stuff that I assume are spoilers and whatnot, that I remember from the Cold Steel stuff, and obviously I'm not going back to try to remind myself of anything, because I'd rather just do this as I go along, and I don't want to say obvious spoilers that I now have context for and get more spoilers for them. But one thing I do remember is the mention of a floating city. So I guess my thought on this has to do with what that floating city is. So I think it's probably definitely the capital, and they have the whole ring thing going on there. We never really confirmed if the great magical thing that the Colonel Richard was looking for is under the city like he thought. I don't think we ever really confirmed that. So I'm thinking maybe it just doesn't exist, and maybe there's something entirely different down there, and he just assumed that he wanted, especially since Ouroboros was the one implanting us in their minds. Why would you tell him the truth? If you wanted him to go down there, you'd give him some reason to believe that the fantasy, the thing that he really wants is down there, the thing that will help him achieve all what he truly wants, not what's actually down there. When we actually got to the ending, and that Guardian showed up, it was the Ring Guardian? We don't really know what the ring is yet, now do we? If I had to take a guess as to what the ring was, I'd assume it's an actual ring, a physical ring that's like under the city, and it like acts as a way to turn it into a floating city. That's basically my guess right now. Taking the one thing I remember from Cold Steel and combining it with what I know about Under the Castle and whatnot, and it makes sense to me. I guess we'll see. I'm still not completely convinced that the Septarians are even like a real thing, because how they've been described make them out to be just like these magical items that can fulfill this super duper mega power in like its specific field, that sort of thing. Or at the very least, I'm not convinced they exist at the scale the myths seem to describe them as. And they could mean something entirely different. And they could be, I can imagine them being part of Ouroboros' plan, whatever that is. Now, obviously, whatever this plan is has to tie into that whole... Well, it doesn't necessarily have to tie into a cycle. But I'm kind of convincing myself, and nothing here contradicts it, so I guess we'll see by the end of the second chapter, I still sort of basically buy into my whole like personal pet theory about the cycle. The idea that the world ended and the Septarian, they had to bring it back together, and whatever this cycle and the stuff that Ouroboros does behind the scenes is maybe either keeping it going or they're purposely trying to disrupt it in a way that could end it. And especially with the Septarian things, maybe they're not real, or if they are real, maybe they're the foundation of this cycle in some way. It will be very interesting to see exactly why Ouroboros and the Chancellor want to use this plan, because I wouldn't be surprised if his involvement in this is his attempt to take over one part of this plan or disrupt it or do something with it. Maybe he's the good guy. Maybe he's the one who's trying to disrupt it behind the scenes without letting everyone know what's actually going on, and he's doing it sneaky for some reason. Maybe he's trying to stop them from ending the world or something like that. So if I had to put a theory for the overall how everything works, based on what I just sort of want to happen, what I know about stuff and all that Guga and whatnot, it would be that the world works by pulling on a limited source of energy, pulling it and channeling it into orbits and whatnot, because they're regenerating energy, right? They're not even like fossil fuels where you use them up and whatnot. Through that process, a thing that maybe the source of them would be those Septarians, a thing that keeps the world's energy supply going, maybe feeding to more than just the orbits and whatnot, and it is enough potentially to like recycle itself or something along the lines and keep the world going. And the Zemurian civilization took advantage of all this power and whatnot, became super duper advanced and whatnot, and basically got to a point where their advancements drained themselves to the bone and ended up causing the Great Collapse. They had a last-ditch effort to pull on the energy feeds from the Septarians and then proceeded to basically destroy them, or something along those lines, or take them out of balance and whatnot, and it caused everything to just nearly get destroyed. And then in order to save the world, at some point, just once all civilization was basically gone, what little remnants were left basically set up some sort of cycle that took what remained of the Septarians and created a system that was repeating in order to relieve pressure on each Septarian damaged or something like that. And then each time that cycle occurred, it allowed the Septarians to continue funneling energy to the world how it's supposed to be. And realistically, how the souls work into that is maybe the souls are part of the energy. Because I remember the stuff from Cold Steel about them mentioning souls and whatnot in this whole cycle business and whatnot. Again, this is me sort of taking the idea I have in mind and rambling out a potential way it could work. And the cycle is intended with the stuff like in Cold Steel and what's probably going to happen in Libero in the second chapter, and essentially going to a point where they can relieve stress on Septarians and keep the energy flow and keep the world stable so that it won't repeat itself. But at the same time, with the advancements of ordnance and whatnots in recent years, you have the situation where technology is suddenly advancing really quickly again. We've discovered this energy source and we have this thing where we haven't had it since basically Zemuria, right? So with that in mind, maybe Ouroboros' goal is to cause another great collapse so they can reset the progress of the world and set maybe not like one that hurts it, but in a way that will bring back the state of civilization to a sustainable state again. That sort of thing. And the Chancellor is interested in keeping the status quo, but finding a way without doing that. That is my thoughts on what the potential. Basically, they're doing their cycles, and the current plan of Ouroboros is a way to trigger a great collapse in a way that would actually work by doing the cycles in the specifics are well beyond me. But I would be very interested if the overall story of what's happening goes along that path. I'm probably 100% wrong, but it's an interesting theory, and it would be a path I don't think it would make a bad overall arcing story to the entire series, especially because it addresses some things that the series, as I've seen, doesn't really address and people take for granted. It would be a very interesting way to do some commentary on, say, the civilization that's currently existing and stuff like that, you know? And I think that's probably where I'm going to end this spoiler talk. It's obviously not as long as the other ones, but I do like the game. If I had to make some predictions for second chapter, though, just some, I guess, some more predictions, so when I do a spoiler talk for that, I have something else to talk about. I guess my general prediction for how the story is going to go, I haven't seen a trailer, I've just seen the other part. It's obviously Estelle's going to, because this is basically how first chapter ended, where Estelle's going to go out and try to find Joshua, and it's basically going to be going around the country, trying to track him down, gathering allies, that sort of thing, and then proceeding to run into Ouroboros as they're putting together their plan and whatnot, and running into Joshua every once in a while, and him having second doubts, and him rejecting it because he knows this is his fate or something like that, or stuff like that, and then proceeding to eventually catch them at the last minute as they're about to do the stuff with, like, the flying city, I assume. I mean, that's the only thing I know, so and then use that as a part of the cycle. Maybe that's also part of the mythology somehow, of Libero's mythology. Because it is interesting, part of the whole the reason I added in the Septarians is part of the energy source is because they're few and far between, right? Each Septarian would have their own base, and one person did tell me there's only one Septarian Libero. One person did tell me that Libero has a very distinct mythology and whatnot from Code Steel and whatnot, and I should think of it as something distinctly and separately, which in this case, my thought is maybe it's its own unique Septarian that's causing all the cycle aspects of it, and each Septarian that is part of this cycle and whatnot could have its own unique effects on the world, because myths say that they do these wondrous things and each does its own wondrous thing, right? So I think, at least from what I know, and maybe I haven't explained it well, I think it all makes sense. And second chapter probably would end with them... I'm sort of thinking that they're probably going to end up being successful, Ouroboros. Estelle might win Joshua in the end, and win stability and stop them from, like, destroying as much as they can. But I think Ouroboros is probably going to succeed in the end, for whatever stage this is supposed to be. And then it'll end with Estelle and Joshua heading off to, well, because he's gonna change his mind eventually. That ending is not going to hold up. He's not going to be like, oh, I want to be part of Ouroboros forever. And then Estelle and Joshua are going to go off and track down Ouroboros, and maybe that'll be part of the third, or they'll try to investigate them, or something like that. I'm not sure about that one, but those are my thoughts on the matter. And that's the spoiler talk. So this has been Echochamber, the place where I ramble about whatever, however, whoever, God knows what I'm even trying to say anymore, ever, I want. And this has been Echo 6. Drive safely, everyone. Oh, and if you're interested, I'm probably still going to do a review of this, probably shorter than normal, figure out exactly how I want to do those. And I'm also going to do Trails in the Sky second chapter at some point in the future, probably after Persona, probably not immediately after I finish Persona. So, look forward to that. See you all next time. Drive safely, everyone.